Right, ladies and gentlemen, I make it just after 6 o'clock. If I could start the meeting by saying that this meeting will be filmed and it will be broadcast over the council's website. If anybody feels as though they don't want to be within the filming, if they could notify the clerk at the end of the table, and she will make sure the cameras avoid you. Okay, if we then move on to the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
We received apologies from Councillor Vivian and Councillor Howell-Hamdani. Councillor Williamson is here as a sub.
Thank you. And I've got apologies from somebody else. Councillor Hussain sent his apologies as well. Urgent business, I've not been notified of any urgent business. Declarations of interest, has any member got any declarations of interest? Councillor Williamson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a personal interest, I suppose, on the Cowley Shore one because it's in my ward. Not a prejudicial one, but I know about it, so I would just say that that's it.
Thank you. Right. Public question time. I don't know whether we're...
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Okay then. That leads us into the first application, which is an application for development at Cowley Shore. And this is a reserved matter application, and obviously the principal application with permission has gone through, but we're looking today at the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the development that's being proposed as reserved matters. If I could hand over to the planning officer who can run us through the details of it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In the first instance, before I present the application, I'd just like to refer members to the late list, where I've received some additional representations, an additional plan from the developer, and that's resulted in some amendments to the report, so please feel free to take a look at those. Just going straight into the application, the scheme, as Chair pointed out, is a reserved matters application for 201 homes and follows on from the outline planning permission on the site, which was granted in August 2020. The outline planning permission secured the access arrangement for the site and the principle of residential development. Therefore, this reserved matters application, as the Chair points out, only considers the matters reserved, which includes scale, layout, landscaping and appearance. The existing site included a large abattoir buildings, and as you can see from the aerial view, the site is also surrounded by residential properties on the southern, eastern and northeastern boundaries. Crompton and Royton Golf Club is situated beyond the western boundary, with open fields to the north and 3 public rights-of-way also across the site. So, turning to the proposed layout, this incorporates a mixture of 2 to 5 bed homes. The majority of the properties will be detached, however there are some terrace properties available in the centre and northeast of the site. The separation distances and garden spaces are considered acceptable, and levels on the site have been carefully considered. A couple of other points that are worth pointing out about this layout. You know, a lot of work, collaborative working has gone into this layout. There's a number of constraints on the site which I'll go through, including public rights of way, diversion, and also drainage in terms of United Utilities assets also run through the site. So in terms of the layout that's been presented today, that those matters are considered very carefully as part of this process. Just turning to affordable housing, the layout offers 10% affordable housing provision, which equates to 21 properties, and these will be delivered on site in the form of 2 and 3 bed properties. The tenure split will be 50-50 between social, rented and intermediate housing. As set out in the committee report, a condition relating to affordable housing will need to be re-reserved, and the applicant will need to provide further details on matters such as phasing and the registered provider when this information becomes available. That sort of matter is not uncommon for these types of developments. And as you can see, the affordable housing is denoted in blue on the plan on the screen there. To accommodate the layout, the public rights-of-way that run through the site will need to be diverted. Footpath 88 will be diverted up the western boundary and will also be diverted through the site, full details of which are contained in the committee report. We have worked very closely with the applicant, the highways officer, the public rights-of-way officer and the Unity Partnership in agreeing the current proposals. In terms of scale, the units proposed are 2-storey. The properties are very similar in size, height and scale to those in the immediate surroundings, and this slide gives you an indication of the scale and types of housing is proposed. So there's going to be a mixture of house types on here, from gable to pitch type properties, rendered brickwork, so it's very varied. This slide shows the affordable housing type, or an example of an affordable housing type for the site, of which there's 2. As stated in the late list, this house type was substituted following the publication of the committee agenda. However, this house type proposed here is not too dissimilar to the previous house type and is considered acceptable. The appearance of the homes will vary across the site. The applicant has selected 15 different house types with varied use of materials, including different coloured brickwork, render, varying roof designs and slate colours, the specifics of which are described in the committee report. The variation in house types and materials adds interest to development, which is really, really important for a development of this size and type. The applicant has also submitted a scheme for public open space as required by the outline planning permission. This is concentrated to the north end of the site. Extensive tree planting is proposed throughout, mainly concentrated in the north and around the existing SBI pond. Tree and shrub planting is proposed down the western boundary with the public rights-of-way diversion. To provide a soft appearance to the public rights-of-way diversion, and new planting is proposed around the drainage pond to the south of the site. In total, 60 trees will be lost to accommodate the development and 279 will be replanted. The open space will be managed by a private management company to be appointed by the developer, and those matters have been agreed with the Greater Manchester Ecology Unit. In relation to highways matters, a highway improvement scheme is proposed in the vicinity of Cockermill Lane and Shore Road, and I'll let Wendy present those to you in a moment when I've finished. In conclusion, the principle of development and access arrangements has been established through the outline planning permission. The scheme complies with the approved parameters plan agreed as part of the outline planning permission, and the scheme also offers a significant contribution to the borough's housing need. The scheme also offers house types that are needed in the borough and will also deliver affordable housing. The scale, appearance, layout and proposed landscaping are considered acceptable for the reasons set out in the committee report, and on that basis we have recommended the application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just bring the highways officer in now just for a brief comment.
So it was a condition of the outline application that a scheme was submitted for highway improvement works at the junction, just to highlight the presence of the junction and to address some of the issues that local residents had about the safety of the junction. This will include additional road marking on Shore Road and the extension of the waiting restrictions on Cockermill Lane.
Thank you. Before we go to speakers, has anybody got any questions of the officers? Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Chair. It's really for highways. Has any signalling been considered? Because obviously the road's not big enough to put a mini roundabout in, is it? And obviously Shore Road at the top and obviously Manchester Road, where this junction is, in the morning, in rush hour basically, it's absolutely gridlocked. So how are people going to get out? So I'm just interested to know, from the traffic assessment that's been done, the time of day it was done, and also has any signalling been considered? Because you can just imagine people sat waiting for quite a considerable amount of time trying to get out onto Manchester Road, and that just really concerns me. Thank you.
So the actual amounts of traffic generated were considered at outline, so we're not considering them here tonight. So I've got to make that very, very clear, because I've been told by the planning officers, and I'll get into trouble if I. But I do have to talk about it because of the highway improvement scheme that we're looking at tonight. TFGM were also consulted, and they had no issue with capacity, which is the number of vehicles that are likely to use the junction. As the local highway authority, although we didn't have any issues with capacity either, we wanted to make sure that it continued to be used safely. So one of the things that we considered was signalising the junction. But when you look at it, the envelope of highway available is so tight that you either can't get the apparatus in, or what we actually saw, because of the parking bays on Shore Road, if anything queues going towards Oldham and that way, and something tried to travel along Shore Road, if it was a bigger vehicle, it has to stop. They stop if there's anything coming. So if we introduced, we can't introduce the signals anyway because there's no room, but even if we had, the width of the carriageway and the parking bays would mean that traffic flow would stop if there was a larger vehicle. So we very carefully considered signalising the junction, but we couldn't. So this is a solution that highlights the presence of the junction, and by restricting the parking on Cockermill Lane, it makes sure that vehicles can get in and out without any obstruction or any vehicles backing back onto Shore Road. Okay.
Can I ask a supplementary question again? So, I'm sorry, Wendy. Basically, obviously, there are parking bays outside the houses, so will they remain as they are? Because I would imagine, I've not driven down Cockermill Lane for many years, but if you're pulling out of the visibility must be affected by those parking bays. Yeah. And I know we'll say everybody's gone to work at that time, but that's never the case, is it? There's always one car there. So what, basically, are those parking bays remain as they are, or does the traffic management scheme sort that out in a way?
The parking bays do remain as they are because it's a balance between providing parking for the existing residents on Shore Road, but the parking bays have been provided in the past so that there is visibility for Cockermill Lane. So that wouldn't have led me to think that we needed to reduce them.
Councillor Williamson.
Just looking at the affordable houses, the affordable homes, it appears to me that they are very distinct from the ones that are being bought, which makes me wonder why they've been built like that. I understand a terrace property, but they just look like council houses rather than just part of that estate. They really are distinct from it, and I just wonder whether anything could be done to make them more appealing, because they just don't look like, they haven't got any of the pitched roof like that. They haven't got any of the
render.
Yeah, they haven't got any of, look at them. They just look like council houses. And I remember when Rose Bay Close came up, and that was all over the front pages because people were saying, I don't want people living on here, because they knew where they lived. And I think that will be an issue on there, that they will know where these people live because they are so distinct from any other property on there.
Yeah, in terms of the types of properties proposed, the affordable housing, in the housing needs assessment, I think it was in 2009, highlighted a really critical need for 2- and 3-bed properties. And obviously, these types of properties meet that need. I appreciate what you're saying in terms of the appearance. They've got a hip roof design, and in planning terms, not unacceptable in appearance. And I also take on board what you say in terms of position on the site. We actually had discussions with the developer around sort of further pepper potting the affordable around the site. But whilst we can do that, it has to be balanced with the registered provider, because at the end of the day, a registered provider will come on, and they do like to have the properties as close together as they possibly can for management reasons. So whilst obviously we've got to consider pepper potting these affordable housing units as much as we can, we also have to consider that we'll be relying on a registered provider to sort of look after these properties, and in some respects they'll need them to be together for management purposes. So it's not a point that we've ignored, it's just a point that has to be balanced and carefully considered.
Councillor Gloucester.
Can I just ask then, in terms of the appearance, like there's no render on those properties, they do look a lesser attractive property, if that's the correct way to put it. And I just wonder why. I mean, I get the expense issue, but as a developer building a site on this scale, clearly it must be taken into account. But I'm sorry, that's not a 2022 property being built, is it? I'm afraid it looks, in comparison to the others look really pretty. They look absolutely dreadful. So I just wonder if, there's a conversation to be had there.
I note those comments. I think the standard house types for the developer, whether they can take those points on board and make some amendments, that'll have to be in their court. But they are standard house types. They've not been designed individually, specifically for this scheme. They are part of a range of house types, like I say. But I take your points on board.
Okay.
Noted.
Have we got any further questions at all? It might be appropriate to ask the agent when they speak about that particular point. Has anybody else got any further questions? If not, we could go on to speakers. I've got firstly an objector speaking on behalf of the objectors, and that's Mr. Neil Hardacre. Mr. Hardacre, you'll have 3 minutes, and when the 3 minutes is nearing its end, you'll be notified.
Okay, thank you. Whilst I've been asked to speak primarily on behalf of local residents, given the nature of our concerns, I think this applies more broadly to all users of the junction of Cockermill Lane and Shaw Road. And whilst we understand that the principle of development has been approved previously, we've still got very real concerns about the impact the development is likely to have on what is already a difficult junction to navigate. The proposed development will result in the number of properties using Cockermill Lane as their sole means of access increase all but tenfold. The reason the junction is so hazardous largely relates to the poor visibility available to motorists emerging from Cockermill Lane. Shaw Road residents park on the road outside their homes, and whilst double yellow lines are in place, they cease approximately 30 metres from the junction. Emerging vehicles cannot see the oncoming traffic until it has passed the last parked vehicle. If residents are observing the double yellow lines, and if motorists are adhering to the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, this distance is covered in just 2.3 seconds. This often results in drivers having to take a leap of faith when joining Shaw Road. Along with the 201 homes, we're likely to see somewhere in the region of 300 additional vehicles, which can only result in a significant increase in the number of collisions at this junction. Turning right into Cockermill Lane is also challenging, as you're faced with either waiting in the live lane, thereby causing queuing traffic behind you, or moving into the right turn pocket directly in the face of oncoming traffic, many of whom don't appear to even notice the current road markings, much less abide by them. Concerns were raised by the Highways consultee during the consultation process, and during the meeting at which the outline planning was granted, the Council's own Highways officer, Wendy Morehouse, stated that the junction warrants signalisation. The solution currently proposed amounts to nothing more than some additional road markings, which simply cannot provide the level of protection that motorists and pedestrians should reasonably expect. Parked cars on Cockermill Lane are also likely to be a problem, given that queuing traffic will only increase, and this will simply add to the pressure for the driver at the front of the queue to join Shaw Road. We fail to see how the introduction of double yellow lines will in any way improve the situation, for surely the residents will simply park on the opposite side of the road. Our primary motivation here is to do everything we can to contribute towards the safety of all road users, whether existing residents, soon-to-be neighbours, or people simply passing by.
Thank you, Mr Hardacre. I don't know whether anybody's got any questions of Mr Hardacre. Councillor Gloucester.
Can I just ask, I mean, obviously I do use that road, but I don't come out of any of the junctions. Have you experienced any sort of near misses at any of the junctions, because there's several, isn't there?
Yeah, there's only one junction. Yes, I have. I've been involved in an accident when I was a passenger in a vehicle where we were trying to creep out because we couldn't see well, and a car came along and took off the front of the vehicle we were travelling in. I've also been in a vehicle behind the first vehicle at the queue that pulled out and had a collision with a cyclist. Near misses are a routine happening because people simply can't see.
Can I just have one more question, please, Chair? So in terms, obviously this development will go ahead. I think we all know that. What if we could wave a magic wand? What can the local authority take into consideration in terms of neighbours and what their feelings are at the moment?
I think whilst we've obviously heard what Wendy's had to say about physical space, signalisation, in Wendy's own words, this junction warrants signalisation. All right, there's a challenge about how we achieve this. What I absolutely would say is altering the road markings. As a resident there that uses a junction most days, I cannot see that changing anything because the current road markings are completely ignored by 90+% of motorists, and anyone in the room could see that from themselves just by casually observing what happens with the traffic there. People take no notice of it.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
I know sort of Hazel's just asked the question, but in an ideal situation, what would you like to see there? Because I know I've travelled down there every single day, and there are times when people are just driving past that, not even looking to see, because they just don't realise that there's something there, or even for Albion Gardens Close as well, people coming out of there, and that's further up of the junction near the traffic lights. People don't realise that they are there, because when the bus comes along and blocks that junction, that's an even more of a danger. So, so I suppose for me, in an ideal world, what would you like to see there to help for residents coming out of Cockermill Lane?
It's got to be a solution that makes emerging from that junction and turning into that junction safe and not challenging. I'm fortunate in that I drive an SUV, and when I'm sat at the junction and cars are parked in the bays, all I can see of the oncoming traffic is the top inch of the roof or so of the vehicles coming along the road. So my direct vision is blocked by the parked traffic, and all I can see is the roof line of the vehicles coming along. How people in a normal saloon car can come out of that junction and turn right, I really don't know. Signalisation has got to be the only solution that won't end up in goodness knows how many more near misses and accidents. Currently that junction is only servicing 24 houses. There's 24 houses on Greencroft Meadow, and that's the only residential street now using that junction.
Thank you very much. No further questions. If I could now move to the speaker for the applicant, who's Sam Ryan.
Thank you. Sorry. As the officer said, the Outline Planning Permission established the principle of redeveloping this site with up to 250 new homes, 10% of those to be affordable to meet the council's housing needs. The approved details of the approved scheme also set out details of the primary access to the site from Cockermill Lane, also granting consent for up to 250 dwellings to be served via that access and an emergency access via Cowley Shore. It also agreed the principle of diverting public rights of way that cross the site and safeguarding the existing pond in the northern part. Redrow is grateful to the officers for their time and commitment to ensuring the proposal before you meets the Council's requirements and satisfactorily addresses issues raised by a range of consultees. This is clearly set out in the officers' report, which recommends approval, with a range of conditions that are acceptable to my client. I'd like to highlight the following. All of the new homes that are proposed are from Redrow's heritage range of complementary house types, design and materials. The bricks and tiles that will be used on the affordable and market dwellings are the same across the range, so some of those materials are used on the market dwellings as well as the affordables, and not all of the market dwellings are rendered. The affordable units, 21 of those will be 2 and 3 bedroom, as pointed out, to meet the local needs identified in the Council's local needs study. Redrow's received interest from a number of registered providers and anticipates entering into an agreement with one of them to deliver and manage those homes. Access is via Cockermill Lane, and the access previously served the access for all vehicles, staff and HGVs to the former abattoir. In accordance with the outline permission, there will be improvements to its junction with Shaw Road, and that will comprise additional road markings, a new right turn arrow, lane marking to guide traffic past the right turn pocket, and slow warnings on the approach to the junction. Red surfacing will also be used on Shaw Lane to highlight the junction and make it more obvious to users on Shaw Road. Those new junction arrangements have been modelled to show that vehicles can pass each other on Shaw Road, and the Highways Officer has confirmed the junction is safe and will provide a satisfactory access to the development and existing housing. The new junction arrangements will be in place prior to the occupation of any dwelling on site. The public footpaths will be diverted in accordance with details agreed following extensive collaboration with officers, and this includes a new footpath along the western boundary. The existing pond at the northern end of the site will be retained, and within a wide area of open space and planting, around just under 2 hectares in total across the site. There'll be a new suds pond and landscape planting at the southern end, and where possible, all existing trees and hedgerows will be retained. Overall, there'll be a net gain of over 200 trees across the site. That landscaping scheme has been agreed with council officers with input from GMEU and will optimise the ecological value of the site, resulting in a biodiversity net gain in excess of 10%. A landscape and ecological management plan has been provided to demonstrate how the landscape and habitat benefits will be maintained in the long term. Redrow aims to make an early start on the site to deliver much needed market and affordable housing in the borough, and we hope you support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of the applicant's agent, Councillor Gloucester?
I do apologise, Chair. Can I just ask about those really ugly properties? Have you any thoughts about that?
I think if my client was sat here, they'd be very offended by the fact that they're considered to be ugly properties. They're part of Redrow's standard heritage range, which it develops on a large number of sites across the northwest and has actually won awards. So their housing types and the materials that are used are standard across a range of sites. And as I said, those types of bricks and tiles that are shown on the affordable properties are used extensively across the site as well. And not all market properties have render on them, as some of the images that were shown by the planning officer there.
On that. So where's the nearest place that I could go to see that property? I'm sure it doesn't look as ugly in the real viewing of it as it does on paper, but where's the nearest place that I could actually go to see that property in real life?
I would have to get some details to you. I know that Redrow do have some schemes currently in the borough, but unfortunately I couldn't tell you the nearest place to go. I'm terribly sorry, but I can get that information for you.
Is there any further questions? Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, just going back to those houses. So how many of those type of houses are on the actual development?
There are 21 affordable houses within the development. They are terraced houses, 2 and 3 bedrooms, which meet the affordable housing need as identified in the council's own local needs study.
So the affordable ones are the only ones that look like that? There's no other ones, there are no other ones looking like that that are for other people to be able to buy?
There are no other terraced properties within the development, but there are other properties within the development that are solely brick and tiles of the same materials that are proposed for the affordable housing.
If there's no further questions, we've got the ward councillor albeit we've had some of our councillors already. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. For those who don't know me, my name's Dave Murphy. I'm one of the Crompton councillors, and I'll be speaking to you this evening. I'd just like to thank members for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight, and I'd like to talk to you about the concerns that I have, as well as my ward colleagues, with reference to this application. As the residents already mentioned, residents aren't opposed to the development as such. They recognise that this is going ahead. It's really about making the best of a bad situation and trying to get something to improve that junction. The highways improvement works proposed are not enough to protect road users at the junction between Shaw Road and Cockermill Lane, and this is likely to increase the level of accidents. There have been a number of accidents at the junction of Shaw Road and Cockermill Lane, and I'm sure if you were to consult the accident injury database, I'm sure there will be records of it. But as we all know as ward councillors, not every accident is recorded on the accident injury database. And speaking to the residents, they've all experienced near misses. The road visibility is severely reduced from parked cars, and the proposal will increase the risks. This is fact. It's not just a case of me making it up for the sake of it. Vehicles travelling along Shaw Road are often going over 30 miles an hour, even more reducing the time needed to pull out to the main road. The junction has been described as like playing a game of Russian roulette and taking your chances. The current road markings are ignored, and I've no reason to believe that the new markings will make a significant improvement, as being it looking like the magic answer to fix this junction. The current ones can be faded. Ward councillors will know how difficult it is with the council constraints to get markings repainted. If they come dirty, they're also, you can't see them. If there's snow on the ground, if there's rain, there's some severely reduced markings. So markings are not the magic answer in this case. The lack of sufficient parking on Shaw Road means that residents from Shaw Road already park the cars and sometimes double park along Cockermill Lane. This is effectively turns Cockermill Lane into a single track road with no opportunities for vehicles to pass side by side. There's only one access point from Cockermill Lane designed to serve all the properties of the proposal. The highway improvement works are not adequate for the size of the development and the number of units proposed. There have been a number of car crashes at the junction, as I've already mentioned, and I just ask members to indulge me by listening to some of the residents' experiences that they've already said. And I'm just going to mention a statement that I think is really relevant. I did, however, have concerns about the use of Cockermill Lane as the means of the access to the site. I was concerned that the intensification of the use of the access would have resulted in more vehicles turning right into and out of Cockermill Lane from and to Shaw Road, which could result in the risk of an accident. There would be a higher number of service and commercial vehicles using the access. The tracking drawings have shown that the left turn manoeuvre out of Cockermill Lane is not possible without entering opposing lane of traffic onto Shaw Road. As a result of this, I requested a design for signalisation at the junction. This would potentially allow a controlled right turn manoeuvre to be carried out in safety and would solve the problem of poor visibility for drivers emerging from the site and would allow service and commercial vehicles to turn out of Cockermill Lane without conflict. Pedestrians and cyclists would also be able to use the junction safely. A design was submitted, but I was not confident it could be provided given the constraints of the site. And I've included my original consultation responding to required additional information. As part of the discussions, a survey was undertaken, and it was found that there was insufficient scope on the highway to accommodate the apparatus required to signalise the junction. So we've acknowledged it. We've acknowledged that we need signalisation, but we're not going ahead because we can't cope with it. So for me, why are we letting this development go ahead? Residents and councillors all agree that the most appropriate way of dealing with that junction, once and for all, is for it to be signalised. Planning is exactly what it says on the tin. We need to future-proof applications and not come back to this in 5 years' time when the developer's moved on to another site, when the council is looking to pick up the cost for this, or even worse, there has been a fatality, and then it's down to us. So in 5 years' time or so, when this development is up and running and something happens, we have a duty now to do something about it where we still can. A couple of things that concern me is the highways officer has mentioned about double yellow lines, extending them. It is not within, and perhaps the group solicitor can confirm this for me, it's not within the gift of this planning committee whether it can introduce double yellow lines. That is for the job of the traffic regulation order panel. So a proposal will go ahead for a scheme. I would have thought that would go for consultation. Well, it will do. And then comments will come about. I'll guarantee you it happens pretty much every application. It'll then come to the traffic regulation order panel where it could potentially be refused. So it's not within the gift of highways to be saying we can extend the double yellow lines as if that's the magic answer. It's definitely not, and I'd welcome some clarification from the group solicitor. But in addition to that, double yellow lines does not fix the delivery vehicles that will just drop off your fridge freezer or your shopping. Well, they're obscuring the sight lines for them residents. Like I mentioned earlier, planning is exactly what it says on the tin. But here's an even bigger scary thought. When one of the developers met with the ward councillors to talk to us about this application, they described this application as possibly being phase 1 of 4. GMSF already describes that area as far more houses than 201. So what will happen here now is, if the planning committee is minded to move approval and let this go with the magic answer, the perceived magic answer of a bit of paint on the floor, we're still going to have to look at this junction again when phase 2, 3, or well, God forbid, 4 comes.
We're dealing with what's before.
Yeah, I just wanted to
if
bring
you
that
stick
in.
to what's before us, it'd be helpful.
And I think, Chair, that was it. So one of the things I would just request my members is if they would consider deferring this application for a proper investigation whether signalisation could be done. I understand that the developer isn't against chucking a bit of money to do something with it, but whether members would consider deferring the application for a proper investigation so we can really consider it and so we can all sleep well at night. Thank you, members.
Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Murphy? Before we go to bringing it open for debate and resolution, could I ask because various things have been said about the incompetence I would put it as of our highway officers in recommending this. So I think it's only fair that they actually respond to that.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to say, I've written all of your points down, so I might just go through them, and it might sound a little bit erratic, but it's just to respond to each point really. And I have already, I said at the beginning, some of the points that answered some of the points that you raised as well. Please be assured that we have looked at the possibility of signalising that junction. So I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. TFGM didn't consider that there'd be any capacity issues, because we all see housing development being constructed and then hundreds of cars all using the roads at the same time, and that doesn't happen. So TFGM were happy with the junction as it is now, and that it would continue to operate as safely as it operates now with the development. It was the local highway authority that looked at the possibility of signalising the junction. And then we carried out an investigation, and it really isn't possible. I would love to signalise that junction, but we can't. We just can't do it. There'd be inefficiencies in the traffic flow, and we just can't get the apparatus in. We can't magic up the space to put the apparatus in. So then we looked at other ways of improving the perception of the safety at the junction, and the way that we can do that is by introducing additional road marking, which it will be coloured. I know what you're saying about it fades and people aren't taking any notice of what's there, and it's not a magic solution. It's just one that's available to us, and it will make the junction safer, and people will see it and hopefully behave differently. It will all be subject to consultation, as you know, but we do sometimes have to consider highway improvements that do include TROs, because that is a form of highway improvement, so we do have to do that. The visibility that's reduced by parked vehicles, again, that's a balance. So if we remove the parking bays from Shore Road, they'll need somewhere else to park, and it will be Cockermill Lane or Greencroft Meadow. So again, it's a balance. It's what do we do? I think that's everything that you raised. The only other thing I'd say is we've forgotten that the road serves an abattoir with all the movements of larger vehicles and all the staff and other visitors for the abattoir. So we've got to remember that access is there for that purpose now, and there isn't going to be that much difference between what the site could be used for and what it will be used for in the traffic generation by the development. There'll be less movements of larger vehicles, it will be more private vehicle. And to reiterate again, we're not looking this evening at the amount of traffic generated by the development. It's only the highway improvement scheme, because it was a condition of the outline.
Chair, if I can make a point, I wasn't calling because you said earlier on that I said that she was incompetent. I have a lot of respect for Wendy. She's been fantastic with me in the past. Yeah. I was just questioning some of the decisions. I just wanted to clarify that, because you're definitely not incompetent, Wendy.
Okay. Could I, just before I bring you in, could I just ask Alan for the legal process? Because the legal process with highways is the same with a lot of housing developments that actually tracks on as a separate element. So if I could ask Alan what the process is.
Yes, Councillor Murphy's quite correct in what he says. If there is a proposal for a traffic regulation order, we have to advertise them, and if there are any objections to the proposals, they go to the Traffic Regulation Order panel, which makes the ultimate decision as to whether the proposals are implemented or not. So it isn't within the gift of the planning committee to say there will be double yellow lines or any other form of restrictions involving a traffic regulation order, because it's a separate part of the council that will actually make the final decision on those.
Okay, if we open it out to full discussion now, Councillor Woodbine.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to comment on the application, but I was just wondering which ward the application is actually in, because it says Shaw on the sheet, and there is a mistake further on that says the Diggle application is in Saddleworth Western Lees, and it isn't. And I know that Councillor Murphy represents Crompton. So I was just wondering, is it in Shaw or is it in Crompton?
Councillor Gloucester will tell us now. Crompton. Councillor Gloucester.
I've forgotten what I was going to ask now, to be honest. Wendy, when you said about inefficiencies in the traffic flow, I've never heard that before. So can you just sort of explain what you mean by that sentence? Because I don't get it.
If I remember the context in which I said it, so traffic flows. So if it's inefficient, it stops. So I think I said it when I was talking about if we signalise the junction, if traffic was queuing, travelling towards Oldham and queuing, we actually saw on site something was coming down the road towards Oldham and there was a larger vehicle travelling towards Shaw, and because of the vehicles parked on Shaw Road in the bays, it actually stopped to let the traffic. Yeah, so if that traffic was stopped at traffic lights, this traffic won't be able to move. So there's the inefficiency because they've stopped. Yeah.
Okay, has anybody got any comments they'd like to make? Councillor Holby.
Thought you'd forgot my name for a minute then, Chair. Thank you. It was only mine or yours, but it was only a question regarding this. Who's going to give the double yellow lines if it goes that way? When it goes to the traffic panel, are they made aware of the representations, or can they be made aware of the representations that have been made tonight?
As I understand it, there's a full and a proper consultation process that would go ahead with the traffic order. I don't know whether any comments that pass from planning.
Well, the traffic officer who prepares the report will obviously refer to the fact, presumably, that it relates to a planning application as part of the background to it. But the issue for the traffic regulation order panel is the objections they receive and whether they are prepared to do anything or feel that the proposals need amending in light of the objections that they receive from presumably local residents.
Sorry, was there somebody else as well? Councillor Gloucester.
So if that went to the TRO panel, which is as what I know it as, what would happen if they said no? Do they then negotiate with the developer to say, can we do this, or does the developer just go away and come back with another I don't understand if it was refused by TRO. What other options are there? It's just, I don't know the answer, so I just want to know.
I think, Chair, it will be that the officer dealing with the proposals would presumably negotiate again with the developer if they thought there was some alternative scheme. On some occasions, proposals are rejected by the panel and that's the end of it. They go away and they're not brought forward. So it's difficult to answer that question. We've had traffic regulation orders that propose that get lots of objections, and the panel, sometimes the officer has a rethink and says, well, actually, we agree with the objections, we didn't really think about that, and they say to the panel, amend the proposals or withdraw the proposals. On other occasions, the officer still says, carry on with them, but the panel decide, no, actually we agree with the objectors and the proposals don't get approved. Well, you're talking about two different things. It's not the development, it's the...
No, I know. If there's no access to the development, the TRO declined the request.
Well,
I just don't understand how now sort of two-phase may access. I thought access was what we approved.
yeah, but the TRO proposal is about easing traffic flow on the highways, so it's a slightly different issue to the principle of access.
And this isn't particularly unusual. This is something that happens on pretty regularly on planning applications. Yeah. Is there any further comment? If not, I'm going to move that we follow the officer's recommendations with the conditions attached. So I'll move that and open the debate. Is that seconded at all? Councillor Ibrahim, are you seconding it?
I'll second it, but can I make a recommendation as well, though, Chair? Could I?
Yes, go on.
With the social housing that's going in with this application, I do agree with what Councillor Williamson and Councillor Gloucester said. They don't look very appealing. Now, if I was a resident living in those social housing, I will feel out of place. So could I recommend that the applicant has a look at those social housing units that are going in the applicant, just to make them look a bit more appealing, so the residents don't feel out of place? Just to make them, I don't know, a bit more colour on the front facials of the housing units? Yes, just to make, because at the end of the day, these residents that will live in those housing units, we don't want the residents to feel out of place to those, obviously, residents that are going to be buying these houses, especially with such a big development. We do want them to feel in place in their own homes.
Right, could I bring the head of planning in just for a comment on that?
Okay, I mean, obviously what we're asking is for you to consider what's before you tonight. We can't negotiate tonight, if you like, on that basis. It would have to go away and look at that again. So it would either need to be a condition or a deferral, which I wouldn't recommend in this instance over that matter. I think there are a couple of points to recognise is that, you know, with house builders, national house builders, they do have the standard house types, and it's not always straightforward for them to deviate from those standard house types. I think we'd also add, just from a experience point of view of Red Rose Heritage Range, they're not, in my opinion, should we say ugly? No one's used that word as such, but just to try and phrase it that way, I think, you know, often on the slides we've shown the affordable housing in isolation. When you see it as part of the wider development, it's a good mix because, as the agent said earlier, there is a mix of other properties as well, and the officer did too. There are a range of different house types. So, you know, having walked round and been part of an application elsewhere, you know, of Red Rose heritage schemes, they don't stand out and they don't look poor quality. Yes, they're different, but then there are lots of different house types on the site too. So I think I would urge you that this isn't an issue that you need to worry too much about or amend any recommendation for, and that will be my view to you.
Are you still happy to second it with that?
I am still happy to. I still agree that I need to go ahead with the application, but I'm still don't like the way it fits in with the rest of the houses. All it just needs is a bit of white masonry paint, to be honest.
I think we could send it with a comment. Which
To be honest, I mean, I'm not into building materials or anything because I'm not from the building trade, but you do see some properties. All they do have at the front of the property is just a bit of masonry paint. That's all it takes.
Yeah. I mean, if you read the report fully, there actually is 15 house types, you know, across this development. It's not as though there's one. Councillor Gloucester?
I have got a question, but just on that, I think the issue is all of that affordable housing, they all look the same and they all look different to the rest of the development. So they're identifiable is the issue.
Yeah.
Just slap a bit of render on, nobody knows. Sorry, it's as simple as that for me. I might be a bit thick, and you know, but seriously, that's all that we're asking for. Just make them a bit more integrated to the rest. However,
before us tonight, we have the application.
I know, and that's absolutely fine. However, I am going to propose that we do defer in terms of that traffic management, because with today's technology, and I don't care which ward we represent, we are seeing this time and time and time and time again. Already, the Hebron Street development in Royton causes absolute chaos at rush hour, and I don't think those properties are occupied yet. I think, you know, it's just about the traffic for the builders. So I do want to propose a deferral just to really look further, and I would never say that you're incompetent, Wendy. I really do respect what you're doing. I don't think anybody's actually used that word or meant that terminology. If it has come from me, I really do apologise because it wasn't intentional. But to defer the proposal, because I think as councillors, we need to be ensuring, because, you know, big developments like this are going to go up all over the borough. And the roads are just going to end up even more dangerous than they are now. These types of housing developments have awful lots of children walking to school. There's no crossing facilities on Manchester Road for the children to get across to the school safely. Poor visibility with parked cars. I've just proposed a deferral, Chair, to look at the traffic and the ugliness of those properties.
It's already been moved and seconded that we approve the development. So what I'm going to do is to take that forward first for voting. So, well, you can only actually move something else if the actual proposal is defeated. I've proposed, and it's been seconded, that we approve the development with the conditions. If it's approved, that's the end of the matter. If it's not approved, then you can move the deferral. Are you unhappy with that? Well, we'll ask the legal officer. Is that right?
You take them in the order in which they were proposed, Chair. So the first proposal was to approve it, so you'd vote on that one first. So, and if that falls, then you'd vote. Then you're back with nothing. So somebody has to propose something else.
Which is what I said. So basically, unless anybody else has got any comments on the development, it's been moved that we approve this with the conditions contained in the officer's report. So all those in favour of approval, please show. That's 7 votes, is that right? Yeah. All those against approval? That's 2, 3, 4. So the application is approved with the conditions as attached. Thanks very much indeed. If we then move on to the next item, which is a development. It's a small amendment to the same development, and I think it's just a redrafting exercise. So if I could ask the planning officer to introduce it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This application relates to a small parcel of land that falls just outside the red line boundary of the outline plan and approval. The section of land is situated at the north-east end of the site. Given that this parcel of land is required to help accommodate the reserved matters proposals presented today, it is necessary for the applicant to make a standalone application to consider the work proposed within the land. The land will be used to accommodate a small portion of a turning head and 2 parking spaces associated with plot 122. The land in question is still in the ownership of the applicant, and the works proposed are more of an engineering operation. No objections have been raised to the work proposed. They are not considered to be adverse impact to residential amenity and are considered to be policy compliant. And with that considered, we have recommended the application for approval. Thank you.
Has anybody got any comments? Would the agent want to comment on it?
Only to say that I agree with what Mr Gill has just said, that there was just a minor drafting error. The land actually is now in our client's control and it's necessary to accommodate some of the parking for the development. It makes no difference in terms of policy issues, so we hope you approve this as part of the development you've just approved a few moments ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any comments? Okay, if I could move to the vote, could I move we approve the officer's recommendation? Is that seconded? Seconded, Councillor Jabin. All those in favour? Thanks very much indeed. If we move to the next item, which is land off Huddersfield Road, Diddle, construction.
Chair, you didn't ask for against or abstentions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologise. Those people against. Those people abstaining. Be quite interesting, the reason. If we move to the next item, which is Huddersfield Road, Diddle, construction of 77 residential properties, and I will ask the officer to outline the particular application.
Thank you, Chair. This application is on land east of Huddersfield Road, Diggle. It's for the construction of 77 houses. It's a full application, so we're taking into account, obviously, the access and the landscaping and the ancillary works as well. This image on the slide is an aerial shot, and it includes to the east, in between the application site and the new Saddleworth School, which you can see there is under construction, which is Diggle Brook, which is one receptor. The listed building on the new school site, which is Grade 2 listed, and the school. And then further to the east is the Diggle Canal. To the north, there are newer housing in Diggle, which front onto Huddersfield Road. To the east are properties on the opposite side of Huddersfield Road, and to the south it is open agricultural land, and this doesn't show, but the works in relation to the parking for the school and both school drop-off and residents parking is, if I just use the cursor just in this area here, to the north of this terrace block. This is the edge red application site that's been put in with the application. It shows that it's split across 2 sites, split by the access road that exists for the school and the previous employment generating site. The land is part of an allocation in the local development plan for a business employment area, and that point and is addressed in the officer report. Before you is an amended layout, which there is a reduction of 1 unit. This reduction is to take into account, firstly, points from the highway officer in terms of the original scheme for parking and access. Secondly, in relation to how the application addresses Huddersfield Road. And thirdly, how the application and the new dwellings address the access road itself. Across the site, similar to the Cowlish application, which you just considered, given the scale of development in being 77 properties, there are a total of 11 different house types. These are included across these 2 slides, and they are a mix in tenure. This is the second slide, just showing the further difference. These images before you here are site images, just to give a context for you now when considering it. The first view there, at the top of the slide, is the northern area of the site, and it views from Huddersfield Road towards the newer properties which are related to in the first aerial image. The image below it shows the area of the application site to the south of the access road to the school, and also shows down Huddersfield Road to where the new junction works have taken place. These images here are the top two images are taken from Amber Rose Crescent and give a view of that, which obviously will face the new access to the northern part of the site. I'll just bring the members to the attention of the late list, where there's additional details in relation to the section 106, which has been agreed in principle to provide 10% affordable housing, a financial contribution of £378,742.20 towards existing open space improvements. Through principle works, we are recommending as officers that this money be spent on Ward Lane play area, Diggle Fields, Diggle Pond and the Sunfield Avenue play area, and the proposed works are listed there. Finally, there's a financial contribution of £55,000 that's been agreed in principle again towards the improvement of habitats for long-eared owls and both woodland and water habitats in the local area. This is to replace the proposed original earmarked improvements for ground nesting birds, which is capable of being provided by the council. Finally, as alluded to earlier by one of the councillors, we do apologise, there's a drafting error in the report in relation to the wards, and the ward is actually the Saddleworth North ward, and again I provide our apologies as officers. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody...
Mr. Chairman, can I ask an urgent question?
Sorry, I'm just coming to...
I know, but I just wanted to ask a procedural question.
Okay.
Because I know the rules on leaving the chamber and then coming back to the meeting and not being allowed to vote. However, I nipped out during the second application to the toilet and then returned a number of seconds after the presentation started. So I was wondering whether I can take part in this application or not.
Yeah.
I noted when Councillor Woodvine came in and the officer hadn't really said anything. So in reality, he hasn't missed anything. So it would be okay to speak on this and participate on it.
Okay. You must have been very stealth-like, didn't see you.
Too much information.
Yeah. Has anybody got any questions of the officer's presentation? Councillor Woodvine and Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Woodvine first.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I have a highways question and then a planning question. Obviously, the site access is that of the Saddleworth School entrance, which twice daily will also be used by buses, hundreds of cars for the staff, and over 1,000 students either on foot, cycling or being dropped off by parents. The access is very narrow already, and this will potentially add another 150 cars into the mix. So I was just wondering how this is highway safe, and also the mature trees that are on site, which are to be felled under the proposal, they create a sound and visual barrier between the school and Huddersfield Road. So firstly, I'd like to know if the trees are protected, and secondly, if the committee does approve the application, can a condition be added that the trees are not felled? Because planting tiny trees is not really a mitigation. Thank you.
If I bring the planning officer in about the trees first and then highways after.
In relation to the trees that border on to the Diggle Brook, there is going to be an 8-metre buffer from the brook to allow for both the flood zones and the brook, and also the habitats, and they will be retained. And there is actually schemes to be submitted for further landscaping and further improvements to that, because obviously part of it, there'll be removal of some species is in there because obviously of things like knotweed and things like that in terms of those species, and there's conditions to address those from the ecology unit. So it's going to be bolstered, but the buffer's there to allow for the brook, so which retains the screen and as you've mentioned.
Could you possibly outline the number? Usually our ratio is 3 to 1. If we take a tree out, we actually plant 3. Will that be followed on this side?
Yeah, the arboriculture troughs has considered the planting schemes that have been put forward, and they have been accepted and meet the requirements of policy, which is policy D.15 from the Save UDP policies, which is 3 to 1. He's accepted that the mitigation that they've put forward for the overall tree loss as part of the development is acceptable, and I have no reason to question that.
Thank you. I can bring Wendy in for the highways concern.
So only part of the site will be accessed from the school access. So it's not the whole of the new development that will be accessed from that. The school access has already been designed to make sure that it's safe for all users. So the buses, any drivers parking in the school car park, and for school children, there's a 3 metre wide footway on one side. So we've considered the additional traffic from the development, and we consider that it will continue to, or it will operate safely even at the times when the school children will be using the access road.
Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd wanted to ask, as has been alluded to, that the access road runs directly to the school. I was wondering if representations had been sought and received from stakeholders invested in the school itself. So I suppose that would be namely parents, teachers and governors, because I think they have a clear interest in the matter. And then the other question I had was that on page 39, it's referenced that the site contributes positively to the significance of the setting by providing a rural setting. I was just a little perplexed by that, because I was wondering what that was relative to, because obviously relative to its present existence as being fields and trees, it's not, I think most would argue that it's not a rural setting relative to what's presently at the location. Thank you.
Would you like to comment on that?
In relation to that, there is a consideration of obviously the impact of on the listed building on the previous pallet site, and the applicant has provided information to address that. The setting of the listed building and the rural setting of it, as it is seen at the moment, that is the case. However, for a long period of time, and obviously we still work to a local plan that was brought forward some years ago, it has been allocated as a business employment area. So this overall site, these 2 segments of land on either side of the access road, have been earmarked for development for some time. May it be alternative development to housing, but the impact of obviously employment development can be much more significant in terms of height and scale. So balancing the two matters, and balancing the fact that the development is set off the access road and it allows views through, it's considered that the impact on the listed building isn't such that it warrants a recommendation of refusal.
Is there any further questions before we go to speakers? Councillor Lancaster.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. The other matter was around the representations from stakeholders involved in Saddleworth School. So that would be any sort of parent, teacher associations, representative bodies, and other, I suppose, because a lot of pupils will be using the access road, which will be shared between this development and the school itself. Just if I could have an answer on that, please.
In relation to public consultation, the public consultation has been undertaken in line with our statement of community involvement, which includes existing adjoining landowners being provided a notification by letter, site notices, which there were 2 of on the main frontage, and it's been publicised in the local paper, given that it's a major application. However, to memory, I can't say that people will have been directly in relation to the school will have been notified directly. However, the consultation is done in such a way to cover all bases that are required by national policy, to make sure that people who have an interest in the site are notified. Hopefully that answers your question.
Councillor Williamson.
Is it actually in Saddleworth, Western Leith?
I think I addressed that point right at the end. Sorry, yeah.
So I just wanted to check that.
Again, I'll provide my apologies. It's a drafting error.
I was getting slightly confused because I was trying to work out where it was. So is it Saddleworth North?
It's Saddleworth North.
Right. Yes, that's what I thought it was. Yeah. I just want to know that main road, is that's Huddersfield Road, is it? And where's Wall Road then? If it's saying it's part of it's on the access is Wall Road as well, is it? No, right, I've got that wrong.
So if you look at the slide in front of you there, so to what is the west/north is Huddersfield Road that runs north to south. The road that comes off in the centre of the two sites is the access to the pallet site that is now Saddleworth School access. Right. And then to the north of the site, slightly offset, there's a new access to the northern element of the application site, and then to the left there, that is, just to confirm again, sorry I wrote it down, Amber Rose Crescent, which is where some of the photos are taken from.
Right, so there's two access sites at the top onto Huddersfield Road. Is it?
There's one access for the northern element of the site off Huddersfield Road, offset for Amber Rose Crescent, and then the access for the southern part of the site is off the access road to the school that exists at the moment.
Right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Woodbine.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Can I just clarify on the tree point, whether a condition can be added to save the trees that are there? Because these trees are about 30 feet tall, maybe taller, and they do actually screen the school building. And I know that the Saddleworth North councillors will agree with me that we have had complaints about the visual amenity of the school, and the trees do provide a screen in front of the school, which will be lost with the landscaping, because the trees that are being planted, I imagine, will not be as tall as the trees that are currently there and have been there for many decades.
Well, just while Matthew's looking things up, just to clarify, in terms of the top of page 37, the report does say, however, the majority of the trees located on the riverbank boundary are to be retained, which, if I'm understanding what you're saying, that's the location you're concerned about. That's the riverbank boundary is also the boundary with the school. So the majority are being retained.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if the trees, which are currently in front of the school, on both sides of the access road, will be retained. So if they will, then I'm happy with that.
You just confirm that, Matthew?
If it relates to the trees that are shown in the images, if before you now, they are some of the trees that are lost as part of the development to accommodate the development. Because as you can see from the landscaping proposals, the houses address the road there, and there are works to go into there to allow for the development to come forward. However, there are planting to go in other areas of the site to compensate for it, and it's the buffer between the two sites, between the back edge of the application site and Diggle Brook, where the trees are to be retained. And in regards to the replacement, like I said before, the planting's been assessed by our agricultural officer, and those schemes are listed in condition 8, so that the replacements will come forward via that.
Okay, I think it's probably appropriate to go on to speakers now. We've got an objector that's going to speak, and that's Liz Murray.
Yes, I've got this down to 3 minutes and 11 seconds at home, so you might have to give me 11 seconds.
Well done.
Contrary to the assertion that this scheme presents no demonstrable adverse effects, I consider that the heritage assessment is missing a number of relevant factors that would have shown substantial harm had they been considered. Although not a comprehensive list, these omissions include a lack of discussion of historic landscape, despite the report noting that Policy 24 of the local plan states that development proposals must have regard to the Greater Manchester HLC study. This site would fall within the historic core landscape type, and the study notes that the historic cores of the Saddleworth district are generally exceptional in displaying only light modernisation. The biggest threat to this HLC type noted as being piecemeal redevelopment leading to a gradual erosion of historic character, as in this example. There's an over-reliance on historic environment data with no attempt to identify other non-designated assets specific to the application site. The HER data is not a comprehensive repository and should only be used as a starting point to provide context for the site. As an example, the dry stone walls surrounding the site should have been considered as a historic landscape feature. In addition, and more importantly, Moordale to the west of the site should have been included, given that it has a tangible connection to both the Loomworks and the Hollingworth family. Currently, the report notes a slight adverse effect due to changes in the setting of the Grade 2 listed Loomworks. This is despite the report also noting that the setting makes a significant contribution to the significance of that asset. From very basic online research, I noted that Moordale was constructed and inhabited by Edward Hollingworth, son of James Hollingworth, founder of the Loomworks. The house was built in the 1890s at the same time as the office building, and it isn't a stretch to suggest that Moordale was constructed across from the Loomworks with an intentional shared view. There are a number of comparable examples of mill owners with houses with views of entrances of their works to ensure that their staff were on time. Moordale and the Loomworks have a direct intervisibility that's been broadly maintained for close to 150 years and which contributes to the significance of both assets. Filling that view with a mixture of housing, roads and lighting and removing the appreciable connection is more than a minor impact for both buildings. The setting of a heritage asset has a finite capacity for harm, and although the setting of the Loomworks has been altered by the construction of the new school buildings, this should not be seen as a precedent for allowing further harm and altering that setting in its entirety. The imposing office building is a key feature of the approach into the village and for a number of views in the surrounding hills. Subsuming that within a housing estate broadly styled on a Diggle vernacular constitutes a profound change in its setting. The presence of the development would result in the loss of the last remaining tangible elements of the setting, resulting in substantial harm. Obviously, as per MPPF, this has to be weighed against the public benefits of the scheme. However, there appear to be no justifiable public benefits that wouldn't also be derived from relocating this private housing development to a similar size site in a more suitable location, and as such would urge the committee to give due consideration and weighting to the preservation of the setting and significance of these assets. Granting this scheme would mean that in the space of only 2 planning applications, the Council has facilitated the loss of the setting of a Grade 2 listed asset in contravention of its own historic environment policy to preserve or enhance any such setting.
Well done. Thanks very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Gloucester?
Can I just ask, that photograph of the actual entrance road, I might have missed this, but is that being widened or is it remaining as it is? Sorry, I probably just...
We were up to the point of asking questions of the speaker presently. Yeah. Possibly we could come back to that in a little while, yeah. Is there any questions of the speaker? No? Thank you very much indeed. We've got no speaker on behalf of the applicant, so Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be a little longer than 3 minutes and seconds. I am a ward councillor for Saddleworth North. Let's make that clear. And I have to say that a number of things have changed in Diggle, physically changed, since this original application of 2020. Some of the papers prepared prior to that date. If you have seen and read the large number of objections, eloquent and heartfelt, you will realise what an important decision is to be made. Could I ask an officer how many comments we've had from Saddleworth North? The last I heard was 78.
I think that's contained within the report. If you've read the report,
it is. Well, I didn't find it.
79, it's noted in the representation
79,
section.
Thank you. Right, so we've had 79 all objections, eloquent, heartfelt, and so there is a lot of feeling about this. Part of Diggle, only yards from this proposed development, is in Greenbelt, and you'll remember the fraction over the school over Greenbelt, where it was and where it wasn't, and the Peak District National Park. I don't know if the Peak District National Park have been asked to comment on this. From Saddleworth Parish Council, we do get communications from Peak Park because we're only yards, literally yards in Diggle from the Peak Park boundary. One of the supporting documents describes Diggle as semi-rural. That's in the pack. The population has doubled in the last 20 years. Before that, it was really rural with green open spaces, even though the loom works and Wharf Mill were the main employers. Diggle itself now has a post office stroke corner shop, 2 pubs, a chip shop, other hospitality, but no other facilities. The beauty of the Diggle Valley makes it a popular visitor walking area, and the Pennine Way passes through at Brunclough, which is further up the road from this site, which is in fact Peak Park. There are numerous footpaths in the vicinity of this application, and one, it seems, would have to be diverted to facilitate this application. To be clear, this application was never part of the GM strategic plan or places for people as it is now referred to. So it was never one of those bodies of numbers. Whilst the school was being built, the people of Diggle have suffered a 4-mile diversion of 6 months, and in addition, a complete road closure when Huddersfield Road was resurfaced. People having to drive all the way up to the Kirklees border practically and come all the way back down into Diggle. And they've suffered a lot. Much was learned about traffic and its impact on the lives of those who live in Diggle in the last year. Diggle is one way in and the same way out. The map in the pack shows Spurn Lane. There was one on there, and it shows Spurn Lane as a route, and it shows it as the same width of Huddersfield Road, but it's not. It is a lane where it is difficult for 2 cars to pass. What I'm going to do now, I must add that it is a single line in which our highways officer will remember. She was part of the design. Where it comes off at the Dobcross end, it comes off the end of Stanage Road onto Huddersfield Road, Diggle, and we have 1 set of traffic lights now going in and 3 coming out to facilitate the various housings and where we've got car parking now. Now, I've tried to interweave some of the comments I've had rather than read separate letters out. One of them is increased traffic and congestion. The council's highway engineer has stated that quote, the mitigation measures being implemented as a result of the construction of the new school will also serve to mitigate the impacts of the proposed residential development. The fact is, no one knows yet how effective the new traffic scheme in Diggle will be until the school opens on the 2nd of March. And therefore the highway engineer's comment is purely theoretical. These are the views of residents. We also already know that the new road scheme was described by TfGM, Transport for Greater Manchester, as having the potential to generate, quote, excessive queuing in both directions on Huddersfield Road, unquote, when the traffic queuing at the car park and drop-off area extends back to the one-way stretch at the entrance to Huddersfield Road. There's a comment here. Does the council wish to add this potential by approving the planning application and ignoring Transport for Greater Council's report. Has the Council's planning committee been to the road site to assess the new road system since it was completed? What I do know as a Diggle resident is that already traffic is frequently queued back to the roundabout on the entrance to Diggle with just normal day-to-day traffic waiting at the traffic lights. There is also poor visibility with parked cars after the new section and residents queuing already around this small section of road. To add a further, that should be 77 now, houses accessing the same small road section via the school drive, you're going to have houses on that site with, say, 80, 90 cars coming out to work when we have got 1,500 children coming down that access road with over 200 staff. And some cars, and the buses. The buses decant the pupils on the site. So whether they're walking, cycling, public transport, that's where they'll come, down that one single road. The footpath on one side has been widened so that the pupils can walk down there. But it's still a consideration, and having cars coming out of this site, this is on the right-hand side of that slide there, which is turning against those going down, the pupils going down, and turning up, and then turning either left or right, either going to Huddersfield or down further down to Dopcross and Upper Mill. And a new road access will increase the congestion in the quarter-mile section of road. That is the road, if you turn left there, when people are coming out towards Upper Mill, Dopcross, Oldham, Manchester. To approve a further 77 properties without first assessing the school's impact on Diggle traffic would be irresponsible. New developments, government guidelines. Government guidance has been for some time now that significant new developments must be located where possible close to motorway connections and uncongested major roads, and also close to fast public transport facilities. This development fulfills none of this criteria. If this application was approved, it would go against not only current government policy and guidance, but also against national and global efforts to tackle global warming and pollution. The road systems are those of a Pennine community away from the solitary main road. School drive and access. The new site plans actually has one of the estate accesses using the school drive, which I've explained. This is simply not safe for groups of children walking down the school drive, having cars needing to drive past them to access their homes. Once the children have turned off Huddersfield Road onto School Drive, whose responsibility is it to keep them safe between Huddersfield Road and the new estate access? Currently, Saddleworth School, that's the one still in Upper Mill, closes the school gates for 20 minutes in the afternoon to prevent traffic entering the site and allowing the majority of children to leave safely. And I must add that on that site, there are at least 3 exit points. There's only one exit point here. Does the Planning Committee know this? This will not be possible at the Diggle location if access is needed to the housing estate and needed at all times. Infrastructure. Obviously, residents of the 77 houses with secondary school-aged children will have a secondary school on their doorstep. But where will primary school children go? Diggle and Dopcross schools are small schools that do not have the capacity to add a great number of children to their classes. As a parent, that's not me, that's the resident. I remember speaking to Dopcross School some years ago, and they kindly informed me that then I would not get my child in, as they knew from the children at their nursery that the school will be filled from Dopcross village residents, and there was no point in applying if I lived in Diggle. So where will primary school children have to go to school when Diggle School and Dopcross schools are full? Has anyone thought of this? Loss of green space. To build in this location actually loses the last of the green open space at the start of the village and will further erode the character of the village. At least the new school is back from the road. You may recall, some of you, that the school was planned to be further forward than it is now, and then it was took back down onto the footprint of the old loom works. And it's looking very well in that position. And it has trees shielding it from view where possible. Building 77 houses in front of the school is building on the first green open spaces you enter the village. Again, the planning committee, if they visit Diggle, will see the current site for themselves. It is difficult to just look at, I wish I'd done a PowerPoint presentation, because I've been up there today to see, and we can see where some of the planning is all coming together, and especially where we've got the traffic lights and the one car in, one car out at the Stanage Road end. Now we come to the substantial harm to a Grade 2 listed building. The development will have a serious negative effect on the context of the listed Dopcross Loom Works office complex and clock tower. It would transform the current open vista across which the building is seen. The new building, street furniture, lighting, roadways and other features of the development would provide an incongruous context for a unique 19th century neo-Gothic building, a rare survivor of this style in the district. I'll tell you something about that from the heritage statement which is in the pack. This building was constructed in 1890 with 2 stories and attics. Gothic with asymmetrical elevations, ashlar stone and Westmoreland slate roofs. The historic interest derives from the symbolic value as part of the local community. It is significant in its setting approaching the loom works, and it should preserve a view from Huddersfield Road, which maintains its prominence at the end of a long vista. It was acknowledged in the planning officer's report for the new Saddleworth School that the impact of the school on the setting of the building would cause substantial harm to the listed building. This was confirmed subsequently in a judicial review, which was Oldham Metropolitan Borough versus Save Diggle Action Group. Judgment in that case made clear that Oldham Metropolitan Borough's failure to consider alternative sites for the location of the school in order to avoid causing substantial harm to the listed structure was unlawful. This decision was informed by Barnwell versus East Northamptonshire District Council, which makes it clear that local authorities must refuse planning permission for any development that causes harm to a listed structure where a suitable alternative site that would not occasion that harm is available. There was a countervailing argument presented in the case of the school. That harm to the listed building should be balanced against the overwhelming social benefit to a new school. In the case of the current development, the impact on the setting of the listed building is significantly worse. Inappropriate and incongruous housing will surround the building, radically changing its current setting and degrading the context on which it is located. Another comment is the loss of a designated Saddleworth employment area. The applicant has not demonstrated that the site is no longer viable for employment use, and the notice for this is some considerable years old. The evidence presented in the planning statement for the alleged marketing exercise is flawed and out of date. For example, it does not consider the new school development because it was before the school was built, and the employment use for this land would provide. I mean, frankly, I'd like to see a row of shops on there. Building on greenfield sites when brownfield sites are available. Now this has been called a brownfield site, but it's always been pasture land, and I think it's had one small building on. So whilst we may argue that it is part of the curtilage of the loom works, it's never had anything done to it except had a few sheep on it. Building on greenfield sites should only be done when the planning process, Oldham Council identifies this is necessary and there are no suitable alternative brownfield sites. Obviously, the site of Saddleworth School in Upper Mill, less than a mile away, will be available. I'm not saying that because I shouldn't. It's just what one resident said. We don't need to know that. Just cross it out. Conservation. It would appear that there is little consideration of the conservation of Saddleworth villages by the council. The objections to the new school in Diggle were overridden by the need for a new school. This is somebody who obviously did oppose the school, but it's there. This is ruining, it isn't ruining the output of the... Right. The parish council objection. The parish council have recommended against building these houses. Please consider their valid reasons. The effect on children at Saddleworth School. The children will benefit from having a new school in a countryside setting. They don't need to look out of their classroom window onto a housing development. The school being awarded the site means that it would benefit from a green outlook. This will be lost if a housing development is placed in this area. It flies directly in the face of some of the many benefits brought to the school by moving to the site. I would like to ask the planning committee to consider a number of things before I vote, and I've got some of them, but they're on a different piece of paper. Which I probably can't find now. But I'd ask you to consider the harm on the setting and effect on the listed building. And this application does not enhance that. The proximity to the green belt and the Peak District National Park. The highways and traffic situation, which has changed dramatically since this application was lodged and needs re-examining. The overdevelopment in a rural village with little infrastructure. Could I ask that the planning committee representatives have a site visit before they make any consideration? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Has anybody got any questions of Councillor Byrne? Councillor Gloucester.
How much of the actual site, because it's not clear on the map, Pam, is actually in Greenbelt? Is it a large section or just a small section?
No, my understanding, and I'll come to the planning officer, is that this is all commercial and industrial land.
I was asking Pam the question, it's her one.
All of it.
I'm questioning Pam, who's just spoken. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Pam.
Thank you, Hazel. Whilst it was in the curtilage of the loom works, I suppose it could be brownfield, but nothing was ever built on it. It's always only had bits and pieces of either sheep, as you know, we're surrounded by sheep there, and nothing has happened. Nothing has ever been grown on that piece of land. It's like odd pieces of land. I see you shaking your head. Yeah, sorry. To my knowledge, nothing has ever been been grown on there or built on there. It abuts Greenbelt on the bit which of the building would be on the right-hand side of the road as you go down to the school. And that's at the bottom. But then across there, it is all Greenbelt. It's not actually agricultural in terms of growing anything. It is mostly sheep and things of that nature. There's no dairy there at all on that site, but it's mostly sheep. Does that answer your question, Hazel?
It does to a point. I think I've forgotten what I was going to ask you. There was another question.
I'll just say, Hazel, that's
it was about the traffic.
Could we please add this through the chair?
Yeah, Chair.
We're going across here.
She asked me a question,
I think the
so I
question's been
answered
asked. I've got Councillor Brownridge that wants to come in.
Yes, Chair, just for clarification, how much of this site is actually allocated for as an employment site in the local plan, please?
Both parcels of land, both north and south of the access road, are allocated as a BEA in the local plan and are not in the Greenbelt.
Thank you.
Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Chair. Pam, you mentioned about traffic again, and I think this is a very similar situation to the one that I've just been in. I've read, obviously, the comments from the consultation, and a lot of people are worried about the traffic impact. In terms of that, when was the school supposed to open? I'm assuming it should have opened in September. And when you say it's behind schedule?
No, it's not behind schedule. It opens on the 2nd of March. I think it's due to be handed over on the 22nd of February, but the children, that being half term, the old school will decant and into the new school because there's lots of stuff. It's not a new school where everything's new. Some things have to be taken with us.
Yeah, obviously.
I must stress I'm a governor of the school as well, so I do have some sort of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Just before we open it for discussion, could I just ask the planning officer to make further comment, because there was quite a significant amount of comment around that.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, there was quite a few comments, so I'll start off. Some colleagues may want to come in after me, and certainly Wendy might on the highways points. I think just to be absolutely clear on this point, to avoid confusion, this site is not in the Greenbelt. It is not part of the Peak District National Park. It has not been considered as brownfield land as part of this application. What it is allocated for business employment use in the Council's Joint Strategy and Development Management Policies, DPD. So nearly 10 years ago, this Council chose to allocate this land for development, for employment development, but for development. So I think we need to be clear that that's the starting point. And the principle of development on this site has been accepted by this council. Obviously the change now is that the proposal before you is for residential development instead of employment development, because employment development is no longer viable in that location, and it's not the kind of location that these days we would look to earmark for employment use, being quite far from the motorways and what have you. So I think in that context it's important to remember that if a proposal were to come forward in line with the current adopted development plan, you could see significant employment development on this site. Could be warehousing, could be offices, could be industrial, could be shops, as was referred to. So they, obviously subject to the detail of the development, would likely have a much greater harm on many of the matters that have been discussed already. So we have to bear that in mind in terms of comparing that to what is before you tonight. I think again, just to clarify in terms of the harm to the heritage, it's not denying that there may be harm through this development. That's part of the balance we have to consider, is whether the harm is such that it outweighs the positives from the development. And I think we need to be clear as well that what has been said about how the school application was considered and the lawfulness of initially of how the heritage assets were considered is not the same in this case. You know, the assessment has been undertaken properly. It has been factored into the recommendation in terms of the impact on the heritage. Likewise, the parish council objection is reported in the report. It has been considered just like every other objection that's been submitted on this application. I understand where the councillor is coming from in terms of the concern about the impact on the school children from the point of view of the loss of a rural aspect, but I'm not really sure that to be considered a planning matter. I mean, obviously, the vast majority of schools in our borough do not benefit from a rural aspect, and that does not necessarily harm the children or their education. But it's not a planning matter, I would suggest. And so, yeah, before I pass over to Wendy, I come full circle back to the fact that this is a allocated site for development. What's proposed may be a slightly different development what was originally envisaged 10 years ago, but that is the nature of this site. And so we have to think of it in that context as a starting point. Wendy?
So I'll just give a general overview of how we made our assessment of the impact on the highway network, rather than answering each individual point, because I didn't write them all down. So a transport assessment was submitted by the developer, and that tells us the types of volumes of traffic we expect from the development against the existing conditions, but they have to take into account permitted development, and in this case the obvious one here is the new school. So the transport assessment was prepared in the knowledge of that, so all the figures relate to the figures that we expect to be generated by the school as well. And obviously I dealt with that, so I've got a very good understanding of the type volumes of traffic that we expect. To put this into context a little bit, so they're only forecasts. We can't say at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday there will be 65 vehicles, because that isn't how it works. So the forecast is on a normal week in the peak hour, and here they've actually used the school peak hours, so it's between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning and 3:15 and 4:15 in the evening, because that's when that particular site will be very busy. They expect approximately 56 two-way movements in the morning. So if you spread that across the hour, that's less than 1 per minute. So in some minutes there'll be more than 1, and in other minutes there'll be less than 1 per minute additional vehicle movements from both of the parcels of land, so not just on the access road to the school. And in the evening it's less than that, it's 48.2 two-way movements in that school peak hour. With reference to the concerns about the access road to the school being used, I've already said that the design of that access road will allow the safe movement of all the users that we expect to use it, children in particular, buses and staff and visitor vehicle movements. The footway will be 3 metres wide on the side of the development, which is wider than a normal footway because of the way that children walk, so they're not walking in the road. It's intended that the access road to the school will be adopted at the beginning, just past the access to the school, so it will operate, to the development, sorry. So it'll operate in exactly the same way as a highway would operate. So the safety of the school children is just the same as it would be on a normal highway, and then beyond that it would belong not to the highway authority, so it would be the responsibility of the school or the owner of that access road. I think I've covered everything. The other thing I would mention is I acknowledge that people are unsure of how things will operate in the future on the local highway network. And when we looked at the applications for the school, there are conditions in there for the monitoring of the shuttle working, for example. So, and all that will be dealt with. I know that when this development will have a lot less impact on the highway network than the school. So it's all when you read out my comments about all the mitigation measures that I could possibly ask for a development of this size have already been considered for the school, over and above what I'd asked for a development of this size. So I'm probably trying to say the development will have little or no impact on the local highway network above what will already be there with the school.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by concurring with the remarks made by my ward colleague, Councillor Pam Byrne, and commend the remarks as well from Liz Murray, who I think brought certainly a great insight into the historic and heritage setting of the area, which I know is of utmost importance to Digglers and indeed all the villages in Saddleworth. I'd also like to, I know the Head of Planning noted the inclusion in the agenda pack of the Saddleworth Parish Council Planning Committee's recommendation. I'd like to thank him for including that, because I think it's important, being that it's the body closest to the people of Saddleworth. And I'd also like to note that, of course, the recommendation which was provided by that committee unanimously, as I recall, because I think I sat in on that meeting in December 2020 when I was a member of that body, it is in line with the expressed opinion of Diggle residents who are very clearly against this application. And I can't see that the concerns have changed, been addressed substantively since that application was considered at parish level. Firstly, with respect to the designation of the land as being employment use, it strikes me that many of the arguments in the report against that use, because I know it cites highway safety, noise pollution, detrimental effect on the visual amenity, I can't see that these concerns couldn't also be levied against this application for residential development, and I don't think it's appropriate to consider the worst possible result from an employment use perspective as trying to bounce members of this committee into voting for the present application in front of us. I think we have to take every application as it comes. In terms of the design, I can accept that efforts have been made in design terms for the proposed development to reflect the wider village setting, the village of Diggle, but of course the visual amenity, that eastern facing view of the Pallet Works office building from Huddersfield Road, will quite clearly be compromised by the development. I did want to discuss trees, but I think that the officer in the initial presentation covered the tree points. I'd like to thank him for doing so, although I must note I am a little bit concerned that I think I understood from his remarks that stakeholders invested in the school weren't directly consulted. I appreciate that that may not be, then the planning department here at Oldham Council may not be obligated to do so, but it would have seemed to me appropriate to do so, considering there is quite clearly a mutual interest, being that it's directly adjacent to and the access is shared. But I think, just to come to, I think what would be the most important, most pertinent point, and one which has probably garnered the most level of concern amongst Diggle residents from my engagement with them, is that around traffic and highways safety issues. I think the proposal for half of the site to be accessed from the road serving the new school site is still something which concerns me greatly. I've heard the remarks from the highways officer, but I think we would have found that had representatives of the school, namely parents and teachers and other people who work on site, had been asked, they would have expressed similar concerns. And on that particular matter, I appreciate that assessments have been made, but it seems to me that we're layering on a little too many unknowns, being that the school hasn't yet opened and pupils aren't yet travelling to and from. But even leaving that to one side and just taking this development on its own regard and disregarding the school aspect to it, I can't accept that there won't be an additional significant amount of traffic, because I think for a village the size of Diggle, this volume of residential property development and the accompanying number of cars, which is likely to be 150 plus, is significant in its own right. And as I say, that's even disregarding the school traffic. And of course, I think when you refer as well to the traffic network, it's important as well to acknowledge the impact it has on neighbouring villages. The immediate closest village being Dobb Cross, and then of course Councillor Byrne as well alluded to further in Upper Mill. So I would like to propose refusal of this application, and I think I would do that because I think there are insufficiencies and still unanswered questions on the traffic points on the basis that the school hasn't yet opened and hasn't yet pupils haven't yet attended there, so I'd say there are insufficiencies in that respect, and what I would regard to be poor vehicular access does compromise highways safety. I think there is a loss of that visual amenity as well. So on that basis, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose refusal of this application. Thank you. On highways, safety, traffic congestion concerns and the loss of the visual amenity.
Is that seconded?
I'll second it, but can I speak first?
Okay, it's open for discussion and we've got speakers.
Okay, well I'll second it, but I'd like to speak.
You'd like to speak now? Okay, Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say it's not in Greenbelt and it's in permitted developments. Obviously, before it was commercial, and now it's what they want to build properties on it. So I say let's go to the vote.
Councillor Brownridge.
Thank you, Chair. Well, so I echo what Councillor Iqbal said, really. It's allocated for development. We're talking about taking land out of the Greenbelt for residential development in other parts of the borough. Here's a site that's not in the Greenbelt. And the fact we desperately need houses, and I think Saddleworth has to make its contribution to that overall number of houses. So I think the fact that residents don't like it, I understand why they don't, because it's never nice to lose green fields. But the fact is, it's an allocated development site, it's not Greenbelt. And as we are so pressured for land, then I think that's a very material consideration. Speaking as a Chadderton councillor, has schools that front onto Broadway and children have to walk up and down and cross Broadway. We have most of our schools in Chadderton have access roads that run through residential developments. There's nothing unusual about that. And I think the provision of a 3-metre wide footpath dedicated to pedestrians walking to and from the school is a very generous and safe measure. I can't see that it's going to put children at risk at all. And clearly all that was taken into account when the school was built. So I don't find the objections to this scheme remotely convincing. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I start speaking, I'd just like to declare an interest that I do represent Diggle on the parish council. I don't know whether that's a consideration, but I'll say it anyway, just so you know. And before I start, I'd just like to say that Councillor Byrne never said it was Greenbelt or in the Peak District National Park. She said that it does have an adverse effect on those two things, though. And it may be allocated for development, but I dare say Digglers would object to any development on the same grounds as this. And I'll try to ignore some of the close-minded comments recently, because Saddleworth contributes enough to Oldham in terms of council tax. But anyway, I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Byrne for a wonderful speech. The only positive part of this application is the inclusion of the Parish Council's recommendation to refuse it, because we've been asking for a long time to have our opinions listened to and often felt like we were talking into a vacuum. The Parish Council does have a consultative role in planning. However, as I said at the parish planning meeting when we considered this application, it is too much too soon. Today, along with Councillors Byrne and Lancaster, I visited Diggle to be shown and to inspect the almost complete £1.9 million highways works at the entrance to the village. These are not complete, but hopefully will be soon. However, we do not yet know how successful they will be, because the volume of traffic expected through the village when the school moves in February or March hasn't been realised yet. Time will tell if they work well, but to add fuel to the ongoing fire and upset in Diggle, is a dangerous game to play. I'm not sure if infrastructure and services are planning considerations, but if they aren't, they should be. Where will these residents go to primary school or to see a doctor? These fields are floodplains, as anybody who knows Diggle can attest, and we are yet to see if the school itself ends up underwater. Concreting over these fields means there will be nowhere around the site for the water to drain. It may not be pretty, and indeed was once used as overspill for the factories, but it is in a characterful setting with listed buildings and at the foot of the Peak District National Park. The visual amenity of the village must be considered important and protected. By approving this development, the council will be completely contradicting its own local plan. 77 dwellings will adversely affect Diggle. I wonder if the highways officer has ever been to Diggle, because it can be assumed these family houses will have at least 2 cars each, which totals 154 vehicles accessing the sites. That is significant and adds extra pressures to the village's highway network. I'm not going to get into the argument of affordable housing, because everything is affordable to somebody, and I have no doubt the landscaping will be lovely. However, that is not justification. The natural surroundings, as God intended them, are lovely enough and in a rural setting. 77 dwellings on these sites at this time is, as I already said, too much too soon. Then again, as far as I'm concerned, it will always be too much development for Diggle to deal with. I do not support this application, especially not considering the contradictions in the planning report which has been presented to us. Thank you, and I'll second refusal.
Thank you. Is there Councillor Gloucester?
Can I just go back to, is that road being widened? Because I can see you said about some work's being done at the junction entrance, did you? Yeah. Is it being widened, that road?
I can't remember the actual dimensions of it here, and I do apologise for that. It will be, the footway will definitely be 3 metres wide, because we made sure that we got a wider footway for the children to walk along. The carriageway will be a minimum of 6 metres, because it's got to accommodate buses and cars. But I can't remember the exact measurement, but it will be wide enough to accommodate the traffic for the school and for the development.
So what width, I know there are differences, but what width is I don't know what the word is, a usual carriageway for single-way traffic? Do you see where I'm going?
I do, but I don't think you mean to ask the question that you've just asked. So, for two-way traffic for buses, the minimum width would be 6 metres, so it's 3 metres for each lane. Yes. So 3 metres and then 3 metres. So I have no doubt that access road can accommodate the traffic for the school, because that's already been considered, and then for the short length that it will have to accommodate traffic for the development.
So in terms of the opening of the school, and I don't know who can answer this question, it's planned to open in February. So I'm assuming this proposal gets approved at some point, and then the school opens and we've got houses being built right at the access entrance to a school that's brand new. Parents haven't really got the system in their heads yet or in place. It's absolute carnage, isn't it? So, you know, is it worth deferring this application until you've at least had real life consideration of the traffic and the way that the traffic management plan works for the school? Because I can't see, it just looks like carnage to me with a brand new school opening, which is brilliant. You know, Saddleworth has needed a new school for years, but on top of that, you go and approve a planning application right at the entrance of that school. But do you know what? Let's not worry, because the long-eared owl will be absolutely fine, won't it? I just don't get it.
Would you like to respond, or? Yeah.
So if the access was, as has been suggested, was elsewhere and it wasn't on the school access road, which remember will be an adopted highway, so it's still an adopted highway. So if we put the access off Huddersfield Road, the children would have to walk, because we've put all the measures in for the school, so we're trying to get the parents away from using this access.
I remember.
Yes. So we want them to be dropped off as far away as possible. The closest we really want them dropped off is in that drop-off car park, and then they've got a safe route to walk from the car park to the school. So if the access to the development wasn't off the school access road, it would be off Huddersfield Road, which is a 2 metre wide footway, and the children would still have to cross it from the car park to the school. So you could even consider that this is a safer option because they've got a wider footway. They're sort of in the environment that it is still a school environment rather than the public highway, which part of it will be. And they'll behave accordingly.
Councillor Oldham.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a lot of sympathy with the councillors that are refusing or are against this thing, and I was looking at the objections and the premises bordering this development, and it looks like there's a lot more objections than there is properties around the place. So we're very interested to know if it's actually 100% of the residents around this area that are against the property. I don't know if we can be aware of that.
I can't comment directly on that, but obviously planning applications go out for public consultation, and you don't have to be a resident that's directly associated with an application to make a representation. You could live nearby, or you could ask anyone to make a representation against it. But a number of the objections were from local people from memory, but I can't confirm 100%.
Thanks. And the other thing was, it is quite pleasant. I've drove past it a few times. It is quite pleasant to see the greenery. And the concern for me is with the highways issue as well, because it all seems to be this ideal world where everybody that's using the access road will follow every rule that's deemed to be given them. And my other concern is that we are, and I think it's been said by a councillor, we seem to be willing to accept things going against the grain of the very constituents that we represent, and then going against a parish council that has come out against it as well. I think at some point the planning committee has got to realise that the people that we represent, if they don't want it, then we've got to fight against these things, wherever it be. You know, sometimes you've got to fight for the constituents against the advice of officers if it's what we want. If we're never ever going to stand up for constituents, there's no point of a committee being here. We might as well just leave it all in the hands of officers. So for me, I'd be refusing it on many of the grounds that Councillor Byrne and the other councillors have put forward.
Right, I'm going to take the vote now. It's been moved that we actually refuse this, but prior to taking the vote, I think I'd just like members to be a bit realistic in the sense that this is allocated land for commercial and industrial use. The development that's proposed is very sympathetic to the village and the surroundings that it is going to be placed in. The officers are very confident that the traffic system is manageable, safe and usable. And I think that obviously we require houses both, well, throughout the town and throughout the borough, and we really do require houses in Saddleworth as well as everywhere else. So I just can't see any particular reason why there's so much opposition to a development that is placed well, placed on developable land and placed in a safe location. So if we move to the vote, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention a few points before you do vote. So first of all, just in terms of the latter comment from Councillor Hoban, I think, just to be really clear, you are to make a decision on this application based upon the planning merits of the case, not whether the application is popular or not with residents. It has to be on the planning merits and the planning balance. I think it's important to make that clear, given the comments. I think just a final point on the highways impacts. I think to spell it out, as clearly as I can, we're talking about the added impacts of this development on the highways impacts. That's what we have to consider in terms of this application. As Wendy referred to earlier, on average, that would work out at 1 vehicle movement across the whole development per minute in the peak hours. Bearing in mind that only half of the development actually accesses directly onto the school road. Again, on average, you're therefore talking about 1 vehicle every 2 minutes onto that access road. So these are not big numbers. These are not the kind of numbers that cause substantial highway safety issues and harm, such that under the MPPF and what that requires, quite a high threshold about what we can refuse matters on under highways terms. Our advice is it's not sufficient in terms of the additional impact to justify that reason for refusal. And I think thirdly, just before we do go to the vote, I might ask Mr Evans just to come in to clarify, because I'm aware that some members have left the chamber while we've been in discussion, so that might affect whether they can vote or not. Mr Evans?
Yes, Councillor Gloucester went out. I'm not aware of anybody else. Oh, right, in that case, yeah. So, all right. So the 3 of you won't be able to vote on this particular matter. Can I also say, Chair, as I normally do at this stage, if you are minded to vote for refusal against the officer recommendation, you need to do so for valid planning reasons, and you will be expected to substantiate those reasons in the event of an appeal by providing evidence to support the reasons for refusal, because if you don't, there's a risk that costs will be awarded against the council on the grounds of unreasonable behaviour.
Okay, I think we're at the point of going to the vote now. Those in favour of refusal, please show. I've got 3. Those against refusal, please show. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, is it? Yeah. So that falls. I will formally move that we approve the development with the appropriate conditions as laid out within the report. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Brownridge. Okay, we take the vote again. Those in favour of approval, please show. That's 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against approval, that's 3. So the development is approved, 6-3. Thank you. If we could move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the erection of 14 residential units with associated landscaping at Oldham Road and Hardman Street, Failsworth. Please, could you outline the application?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The application has been presented to Planning Committee today because the council is essentially the landowner. The scheme is a full application for 14 homes, and it relates to a rectangular shaped site which is bound by Hardman Street to the east, Oldham Road to the south. Ooh, just getting it up so you can see it.
Is it not going?
Why is it not doing it? Sorry, some technical glitches. Oh, is it coming on? Ah, right. Okay. Okay. Oldham Road to the south, Haywood Street to the west, and commercial use is situated to the north. As you can see from the photo, the site is vacant, has become overgrown grassland. The land is also listed on the council's brownfield register. The site has an allocation for mixed use under saved UDP policy B1.3, which permits residential use on the site, and therefore the principal residential development is acceptable. As you can see from the layout, the properties address the frontage of Oldham Road, which adds positively to the main street scene. The separation distances and garden depths are acceptable for future residents, as set out in the committee report. Noise and air quality assessments have been undertaken and subject to the mitigation set out in the committee report. No objections are raised by environmental health. The scheme proposes 2 different house types, including a 2.5-storey house type and a 2-storey house type. The surrounding area is characterised by a mixture of buildings which vary in heights and size, which are set out in the committee report, and with that considered, the proposal for these house types is entirely acceptable. That's just the 2-storey property. As you can see, the appearance of the house types is contemporary. The main materials are set out in the committee report. However, in summary, the properties will be constructed with red brick, with projecting brick detailing to add some interest, grey slate roof tiles and anthracite-style window openings, which will undoubtedly be an improvement on the existing site. This slide shows a street scene. So the top street scene will be seen from Oldham Road, and the bottom one will be from Hardman Street. A landscaping scheme has been submitted with the application, which includes a mixture of shrub planting and hedging throughout the site on the key boundaries. The development will result in the loss of 4 low-quality trees, and these will be replaced by 12 new trees on the site. Given the space on the site is limited, open space provision was not possible, and therefore a contribution of over £25,000 has been secured, and this will go towards the maintenance and improvement work at Moston Brook Corridor. The scheme makes a good contribution to the housing need in Oldham and will also result in the redevelopment of an existing brownfield site. No objections have been raised from any consultees, including highways, and the scale and massing and appearance is considered acceptable, and for those reasons the application has been recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Has anybody got any questions of the officers? Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small one. The access off Hardman Street, is there only one access for vehicles from that side? But is there access, can I see like a footpath from Haywood Street? Is there access, is there pedestrian access there?
I think that is the case. Yeah, I can't see from here.
There seems to be a line. I don't know whether it's just something on the drawing. So there's vehicle access from Hardman Street. Is there pedestrian access from Haywood Street?
Yeah, pedestrian access is from Haywood Street, yes.
Right, to the back of the main house.
That's the main access point.
Yeah, I could see a line and just couldn't make out what.
Yeah, so that's the main access point. I mean, I would consider that to be a much better access point than from Oldham Road, for example.
Yes, it was just the vehicle access on Hardman Street, you can see that straight away. Yeah. It was just whether there was extra access from Haywood Street, I just couldn't see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here today to speak in favour of this application on behalf of the applicant. I'm here with Tom Whitehead of Lancet Homes, who are one of the leading family-run and privately owned house builders in the North West. We ask that you support the officer's recommendation of approval of the application, which will see high-quality new homes on a sustainably located brownfield site. Lancet Homes have given a lot of thought to the types of homes that are needed in the area and what these new homes should look like. The officer welcomes the appearance of the new homes and considers that the proposal will be a considerable improvement on the aesthetic appearance of the land. The scheme has been carefully designed. We have consulted extensively. None of the statutory consultees have any concerns, and I'm here today for any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of the agent? No? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, just a quick one. I think Lancet Homes have built other properties in Failsworth over the last few years. I was just going to ask one of the councillors for Councils West where they are, if we've ever had any issues with the opposite the Mare and Fold. They're Lancet, aren't they, on Ashton Road West? We're in Failsworth, I think they were Lancet. Did we ever have any issues with them opposite Mare and Fold?
Yes.
I have had. We did have a couple of years ago when they were first the old Failsworth Mill site. That there was various issues with the properties, but whether they actually sorted them out with the builders in the end, I presume they did. But I mean, whether that's a relevant planning issue on this one, I don't know.
I think that at this stage that's not a relevant planning issue at all. Yeah, yeah. Is there any other questions? If not, could I move approval? Is that seconded? All those in favour of approval, please show. Those against? No. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. If we could move on to the next application, which is 14 residential properties on the former Royton Health Centre in Royton. I'll ask an officer to outline the development, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application, as you say, is for 14 residential properties on the former Royton Health Centre site on the junction of Rochdale Road and Radcliffe Street. The first slide shows an aerial image just to outline the context of the site. The application site is this brown area of land in the centre of the image. To the north there is Royton Park. To the east there are a mixture of commercial and residential properties on Rochdale Road, and further down to the south east there is the Royton Town Hall. To the south of the site is an area of parking / the rear service areas of some of the units on the precinct, which is here. To the west of the site is a public car park, and to the north again there is a commercial property that is in mixed use of a restaurant and a beauty salon, as I understand. Again, please, this is the edge red of the site. As noted on the late list, there's a point being raised by an objector in relation to the area as edge red, including some of the public highway, which is this footpath to the front. The application site is owned by the council and is one of the reasons why it's before you for consideration, and as such the area has been edge red appropriately, outlining obviously the ownership and the application site. The slide before you here is the layout. The layout includes two house types, one of 3 stories, one of 2 stories. The 3-storey properties are to the northern aspect of the site here. Sorry, the pointer's not up, isn't it? Sorry. The northern aspect of the site here, and then there's 2 blocks of the 2-bedroom properties to the south here and here. All the parking is to the rear. There's 22 spaces. Each property benefits from its own front and rear amenity spaces. There are 2 areas for bin collection to the rear inside the parking area, which is here, and to the sort of south area here. Move over. Finally, there's a small area of on-site landscaping. However, there is no on-site open space provision, and there is an agreed in principle contribution of that towards improvements of Royton Park, which I'll outline at the end. Going forward, just to illustrate what the house types look like, these are the elevations. The top left there is the 3-storey element, and below are the 2-storey. This slide, the applicant has provided some visual interpretations of what the scheme would look like if approved and completed. And the top image there is Rochdale Road, showing a slight fall of the site. Another comment that's been raised from an objector in relation to the aspects of that. Information has been provided in terms of spot levels, and it's an approximately a metre between the left-hand side here, as you see it, 2-storey block, and the 3-storey, which are on the corner of Radcliffe Street and Rochdale Road. Finally, just some images just to give a context to the site. As you can see, the site has been cleared and all the councillors here, I'm sure, know that the site's been clear for some time, and the facility that it provided previously in Royton Health Centre has been replaced. There's 2 new health provisions in Royton, and the site has been fenced off with a knee-high rail and grassed over for amenity reasons. Again, I'll just point you to the late list where it's been noted that we've had 3 additional representations from a previous objector outlining the points they wish to raise. One being in relation to the bin stores, the second being in relation to the access coming off Spring Garden Street, which is also shared access to the public car park. The third being the change in levels, and the final one being the inclusion of an area at the front of the Rochdale Road footway and density. Those points have been fully addressed in the late list, and the application is still recommended for approval, and the recommendation isn't changed. The recommendation includes a list of conditions which are before you in the report, and a section 106 for a contribution of £27,140.16 towards the improvement of existing public open space in the vicinity of the site, specifically a multi-use games area, tennis/basketball and skate park improvements, plus infrastructure improvements at Royton Park, on Bleasdale Street, which was outlined at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions of the planning officer? Councillor Williamson.
It's not my patch, but I do know it well. And just recently, I've had communication from a Crompton resident who uses Royton Park, and they were asking about lighting, etc., in the park. Is there anything like that put aside from this section 106 sort of thing for lighting?
In principle. It's been agreed with the applicant that the money would go towards what's outlined. However, I'm sure Peter, the head of planning, had interrupted me if I'm wrong, but if you're minded to approve, we can take some consideration of where the money is to be spent and go to the applicant and see whether that would be acceptable.
Yeah, just to add to what Matthew said there in terms of, obviously what was outlined here is what's been discussed so far, what's been agreed or recommended by our park services, obviously what the applicant is happy with. If you are minded to approve the application tonight, it's delegated to me to actually approve it because of the section 106, so there is still an opportunity to negotiate on that if that is what is needed in terms of lighting. But obviously the things that are proposed are also needed in the park, so we have to make some hard choices, shall we say, in terms of what we spend the money on.
Sorry, if I can come back, please, Chair. I think Glendale was of the opinion that there should not be lighting in the park, but that's why I was just clarifying that there wasn't any lighting happening in there. So thank you.
I think to some degree, we always like what councillors to have an input in exactly what the money's spent on. There's already an allocation come from the Vernon Mill towards Royton Park, and I think that put together with this is possibly something that can have an input from ward councillors. Councillor Surgeon.
Thank you, Chair. My question's on page 61 around affordable housing. I know you mentioned in there that obviously the transition hasn't taken place yet. Can I ask whose decision was it to stick to the previous framework requirement rather than going with the latter? Thank you.
So we're in a bit of a transition period, as you outlined, in terms of the national planning policy framework has changed the policy nationally that in effect, local authorities should require planning obligations, including for affordable housing, on developments of 10 or more dwellings. But our joint core strategy DPD document outlines 15 or more dwellings, not 10 or more. So at the time of when this application came in and the discussion started, we were still working on the basis of 15 or more. And so that it's only fair, having started that process under that policy, that we continue that through at this point in time. But obviously, if it had come in later, after we started to look at 10 or more dwellings, we would have been able to ask for affordable housing, but I say it's about being fair to the applicant in terms of the timing of their application and the policy in place when they submitted in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
If we've got no further questions, could I ask Mr. Giellan, is it, that wants to speak in opposition to the development?
May I thank the Chairman and members of this committee for allowing me to speak on this application. My background is that I have an architecture MA from the University of Manchester. Although specialising in historic building restoration, I have considerable experience in reading and interpreting drawings. It is thus that when I looked at the drawings for this scheme, I became aware of a considerable number of problems and summarise these briefly below. Now, on initial inspection, the scheme seems not too bad, but it is immediately evident that the site is cramped, very narrow relative to length, and immediately accessed off the access route for Royton District Centre car park. Most people would not have the experience or training. I would not get out a ruler to check scales and detailing. The developer claims to have complied with all relevant guidance, but I disagree with this assertion. Problem 1 relates to waste disposal. I've measured the areas and there is physically only enough room in the collection areas for 25 against the 42 required, not including vegetable waste caddies, i.e. up to 56. Double the number provided. These are not screened as required and access routes are only 750 millimetres wide, actually behind parked vehicles on the south side. These areas are required because the bins cannot be placed on the street, which is the Royton Centre car park access, and bins must be collected from the site itself. There will also be problems of waste vehicles blocking the car park access. There is no car park landscaping as required. It is not my view that the very limited amenity on the site can be compensated by a payment for facilities in Royton Park. There is no allowance for the site to be sustainable, that is, can be modified for future changes. In particular here, it is not possible to charge electric vehicles, and there is little scope for home working in the exceptionally small gardens. This includes the lack of scope for further efforts towards waste recycling. The planning authority has now asked for cycle parking, but this will be difficult to incorporate given its further removal of limited space. There are no cycleways or footpaths to the district centre within the site.
30 seconds.
Sustainability is a requirement under the current government guidance. The roof apex line cannot be built as seen on the drawings, as given the site slopes shown, these will be substantially higher than expressed, both because the fall is incorrectly shown and the fact that in practice no one would build to the slope, as this would create all sorts of issues relating to access and drainage and require the buildings to be further from Rochdale Road on the right as viewed to accommodate the level changes. The application drawings are in simple terms inaccurate and should be revised before the application is determined. The massing of buildings and scale will be substantially different and much more dominant.
Time.
Are you stopping me? Can I get to the end, about 20 seconds or not? You allow me to do that? Thank you. The massing of buildings and scale will be substantially different and much more dominant when built, a matter very much of concern to the other parties submitting objections when I discuss this with them. I emphasise that my main concern is that the development should work well and does not cause problems for its residents, which in addition to problems of massing and scale with respect to the 3-storey dwellings, which are not appropriate for the location. Local government and guidance is clear that issues such as providing housing must not override the need to provide development of good quality. Doubtless the housing itself will be reasonable standards. It must comply with building regulation and energy usage requirements. I do not believe that this will be true of the site setup as a whole. I do not consider these matters to be those of opinion, but are measurable and definable. Thanks.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions at all? Speaking? No. If I then could go on to the agent representative, which is Rebecca Dennis again.
Hi, we ask that you support the officer's recommendation again for approval of the application. The officer considers that the proposal will support the vitality of Royton Centre, create a strong response to the principal street scene of Rochdale Road, and is ultimately of a high quality design. The officers also dealt with in the late report the comments made to the committee reports, for instance, picking up the fact that the bin storage provides sufficient area for all the proposed dwellings to be put out on collection day. It also, in the late report, deals with the site levels and the development density. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any further questions? Has anybody got any comments they'd like to make before we address a vote on the development? No. Councillor Iqbal.
Thank you, Chair. In hindsight, to the gentleman who's opposing the application, I think we might need to take time to look at the details and look at the issues that the gentleman has raised. And I say that we defer this application so that the developer and the council, well, the developer is the council, look at the details as to what the gentleman is stipulating that those are the issues.
If I could ask the officer to address them, I think that all the details that have actually been raised are addressed within the report and the layout list. But if you want to comment.
So in relation to the application, each property is provided private rear gardens. There's sufficient room in the rear gardens for the accommodation of the bins that the council provide. The footway at the back that is in between their rear garden boundaries and the parking area, as the gentleman said, that width is sufficient for our council issued bins to be moved. The bins are to be placed in a position to be collected, and it is felt that, well, I've scaled the drawings off and done the area calculations, and I'm certain that it's sufficient for the bins to be put out. Added to that, our environmental health team has considered the application, and they raised no objection in terms of that, and that is one of their considerations. So that's the first point in terms of the bins. In terms of the levels, the gentleman is right. There is a change in levels on site. The applicant has dutifully provided spot levels. Those spot levels have informed their design. The design is based around computer-aided design, and it's quite clear that if I just skim to the illustrations, the mouse is playing ball here now. You can see on the top image there, it's an illustration. It's there to provide an understanding for people who aren't necessarily qualified, like the applicant's consultants, and obviously the objector himself has some qualifications, and myself. There is a fall across the site of about 1 metre. If you take into account the spot levels of the 3-storey block against the other 2 blocks, you know that there is a difference. However, the difference in the ridge height is only 1.7 metres. So the difference between the far left block, as you all see it now, the 2-storey element, and the far end block of the 3-storey, because of the change in levels, that gets reduced down to 0.7 of a metre. Which this image is to show that those 3-storey properties will be slightly higher in terms of ridge height. However, if you visit Royton and you drive around Royton, you can see that in the town centre there are many different ridge heights, there are many different eaves heights. It's an old centre. It's built up of heritage properties, it's built up of the precinct, and it's built up of new development as well. And it's felt by the planners, and that's part of our recommendation, that the 3-storey properties on that corner provide some significance and follow the trends of new development in the town. Again, bringing forward a brownfield site has significant social economic benefits, and it's felt that the provision of this housing is following both national and local policy and is going to benefit the local centre by bringing residents in there. In terms of his points about sustainability, there is an existing access along Rochdale Road that takes you to the town centre. I appreciate that there isn't a footway that goes directly from the rear all the way through. However, the application does provide a footway that brings you off Radcliffe Street and rounds the rear of the properties. So if you are inclined to enter the properties from the rear, then there is a provision there. And I think the final point is, his point was in relation to the objections. It's noted in the report there was 2 objections. Originally there were 2 main objections received. However, sadly one of them was a petition with 3 signatures, and I've made that amendment to show that in real terms there were 4 objectors in terms of people. However, there was only 2 main representations made. I think that just about covers it. If there's anything else, let me know.
Thank you. You sold it. That's fine. Thank you. I will withdraw my comments. Thank you very much.
As a local resident, it's a development that I welcome. I think that the anticipation locally was that there was going to be a big block of flats built there, and I think that we've got 14 family houses, which I think is refreshing, right in the middle of the town centre, because this is one of the most sustainable sites you could possibly have, being literally 20 yards away from the shopping area, as well as having bus stops in front of you. So I will therefore move approval with the conditions recommended by the officers. Is that seconded? Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Those against? So 1 against and the rest in favour, which is, I think, about 12. And I think that concludes the business for this evening, and thanks very much for your attendance and your patience.
Can I just ask about the late list? Because I didn't have the late list in front of me. I'm not, when we come in, Katie, I'm sorry, I didn't think to look for it. I was on the last minute. Yeah. So can you just remind us that there's a late list there for us to consider? Thank you.
I think you must bear in mind as well that it is actually published and sent to you.
I know, but I wasn't near a printer, so I couldn't print it off. I'm sorry.